Please welcome our MC to the stage, NEAR Foundation's David Morrison.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming out to the final day of NEARCON 2023! All right, how you all doing? Hungover? Yeah, well, you're gonna be even more hungover tomorrow when you got the big party tonight. I just want to say a huge welcome to everyone. It's been an absolutely incredible event. Do you agree? Yeah? Perfect. Okay, we have a wonderful lineup of speakers for you today. I think the stage is going to close about 1 o'clock. There's going to be some alpha downstairs with Ilya and co. It is your last chance to grab swag, and I've heard there's a fire sale. There will be an NCon QR code up here that you can scan to grab yourself the last little piece of change to get whatever t-shirts, hats, water bottles that you want. That's all there's left. But that's enough of me. We have a wonderful panel about the NEAR Governance Forum. And I'm going to introduce your wonderful moderator, who I think is actually slightly taller than me. Yeah? We'll find out, Gus. Come on. Come on. This is Gus Friis of NEARWEEK.
Yes! So, hello everyone. Welcome to this first session on the last day of NEARCON. Today we're going to talk about NEAR Digital Collective. And I say it that way and not NDC, because I feel in this discussion it's important we are not just using abbreviations and really make it accessible for people who perhaps are not as much as you guys, like following NDC all the time. For this session, we're going to have 55 minutes. We're going to divide it into like two main pieces. The first piece is going to be us. First, we're going to hear about you guys. We're going to hear about the purpose of the body you represent, a bit about you guys, a lightning talk, about 3 minutes each. And in the second half, we will hear about what you have to answer for questions from the audience. And that's an opportunity for everyone in here. Thanks for showing up. That you can ask what's on your mind, and if we have nice, polite answers, we will answer politely. So looking forward to conversation. We all have good intentions. So there's been a lot of debate recently around a lot of things in DC, but I'm sure we can have a very nice conversation. I don't want to speak much myself. I can just say my name is Gus. I work at NEARWEEK and also Building Heroes. Not too relevant for this conversation. How I got into this field originally of blockchain in 2016 was actually because of governance. I'm a political science student and very active in the DAO ecosystem. So governance, both from the old world, centralized and decentralized variations, I find very interesting. Enough about me. So Cameron, why don't you tell a bit about yourself and like the house you're in now, or the body you're in, and what's the purpose of that?
Great. So, hey everybody, my name is Cameron Dennis. I've been working in the NEAR ecosystem for the last 3 years or so, specifically at NEAR Foundation, Pagoda, or NEAR Inc. before, and I represent the House of Merit. I'm one of 15 elected people, so this body is primarily responsible for providing recommendations to the Council of Advisors on how a budget should be spent, and we are the ones to sort of be more forward-facing with these grassroots DAOs, these organizations that are applying for money through the NDC. So we essentially try to filter them and make recommendations to the budget of the Council of Advisors. And so, Blaze will probably tell you a little bit more about the COA, Council of Advisors.
Do you want to swap?
But in a nutshell, they define the what, we define the how. So they say we need these things done, and we are like, okay, great, this is how we're going to go about it, this is how much money we're going to need, and this is how we're going to spend it. So we'll dive more into like actually what's gone on thus far, but I think that sums it up.
Yeah, thanks. AVB, please go ahead.
Hi, I'm AVB. I'm from the Transparency Commission. So in my background, I actually have studied law, technically a lawyer in Australia. And yeah, I mean, a guru would say at the top of the mountain that the universe is conspiring to help me achieve my mission, which is to see NEAR succeed. They sent me to law school. It was torture for 7 years. And now I somehow ended up in the Transparency Commission. So the Transparency Commission resembles a legal body to a large extent. It's there, as the name implies, to make sure that there's accountability as we move to these new forms of governance. And yeah, it's just an oversight body we've put in a lot of work to try to define what the processes are, what the scope are, and yeah, we'll be forthcoming with over 100 pages worth of frameworks to help us deal with some outstanding issues.
All right, yeah, so hey everyone, I'm Blaze. I've been with NEAR since before mainnet, started as part of the validator competition, joined that, became a validator on NEAR. I've been an active community member and contributor to the ecosystem in general, then co-founded Cheddar, which is a small yield farm focused on helping provide opportunity for small wallet balances on NEAR, and then the champion of the NDC in terms of just getting V0 governance to a point where we could launch to where we are now. So now, as part of that, a member of the Council of Advisors, which is really a 7-member council focused on advising the House of Merit, which is where Cameron is. So the House of Merit is about budget allocation and about establishing governance processes. The Council of Advisors is somewhat like an oversight council to that, so they have the ability to veto budget, to veto policy changes that they might make, but also really to more work with the HOM and the rest of the governing bodies to assure that governance is aligned to the strategic direction of NEAR and that we're actually deploying funding and deploying NDC to grow and sustain the ecosystem. So yeah, glad to be here, and thanks everyone for joining.
We thank you all for your public service in those chambers. Thanks a lot for that. So, yeah, thanks for that summary. Before we go into like more debates around specific topics, I think it would just be, for my own curiosity, quite interesting to hear if each of you around as well, hearing from your side. Cameron, starting with you. What do you think works well in NDC in the holders right now, and what don't you think like works so well? What's the main challenges?
Yeah, so just for context, the NDC was first created by a group called the Governance Working Group, or the first legal framework. And so the framework was intentionally designed, and I think AVB and Blaze can talk more about this, but to be sort of broad to start. And the whole goal is for the House of Merit to kind of refine it and actually submit like formal bylaws and how these things operate and how voting works and the whole bit. And so I would say that has not totally come to fruition yet. The House of Merit is a little bit fragmented right now. And we can also go into why. In a nutshell, for those who did not participate and don't understand how this works, the voting body is essentially anybody that has a crypto in your wallet and went through the I am human verification process, which means you scan your face, and that image then gets uploaded to a GDPR-compliant database through this organization called Fractal. And these are the people that are now registered to vote. And they're the ones to decide on who actually gets placed in these different houses. And so that, although it is actually, I think, one of the better approaches as we've seen in the blockchain space, and I've been in this space for about 6-7 years now, and I've also participated in decentralized governance, normally that doesn't work very well, because those who actually have all the votes can essentially place their people in key offices and do it strategically. So they have majority for when a budget comes through, and they can just essentially approve it and steamroll anyone who disagrees. And so unfortunately, this is kind of what has happened in a way. It's not too far off. It can be fixed, I guess is my point. But right now in the House of Merit, there is a very strong coalition, and they are very coordinated, and so they don't necessarily need to cooperate with anyone else because they can essentially push proposals through and vote, at least internally within the House of Merit, to get them passed. And so what we've seen thus far is decisions being made without the entire House of Merit even participating, because they can just make a proposal, pass it within themselves, and then push it on the Council of Advisors. And I feel like that has actually led to less engagement from the people who really are trying to do it for the right reasons, because their voice doesn't really matter. So I think that's something that we definitely need to change in terms of what is going well. I did appreciate the sort of speediness of the Council of Advisors coming out with metrics, defining the what. And so that was good. But besides that, we have a lot of work to do.
And with that bridge, let's go to AVB. Same question. What do you think works well? What do you think is not working well? And you can speak for your own body, but you're allowed to speak about the whole.
I'm an individual. Nothing I say is legal advice. If you want to see what works well, I would look at DevHub, and I would split the NDC landscape in several categories, because multiple things can be true at once and you can mix and match. We may have to revise the voting body because it is too broad. That may be true. But it may also be true that the majority that got in because they represent the general sentiment of the community. So there's a tension there between finding the right balance of who do we want to participate actively in governance and acknowledging grievances of the community. The third category, which is where I would focus on, especially through the Transparency Commission, is just the processes. Assuming that the people elected have the mandate and that they do represent some interest in the community, and by the way, most of the House of Merit is actually aligned in what they want to achieve. But we have now our discrepancies in either how to achieve it or just personality clashes, different work modes. So what I personally think should be the priority would be to have very well understood, simple processes so that everyone can be on the same page. Even if you're in a minority, you get your period to discuss, to be heard, case closed, moved on, and it's just having the sense of fairness. We're not going to be able to win all the time. We're not going to be able to have something perfect. We just need to get to the minimum viable trust. Otherwise, the long-term viability of the institution is not there. If we're not able to agree and trust internally, the community is obviously not going to.
Yeah, please go.
So over to me. So the first thing to understand about governance and decentralization is that they are very difficult topics, right? This is something that hasn't been really solved in the Web3 space very well. And so with NDC, we took a completely different approach where we put the community at the heart of governance instead of hiring high-end outside counsel or advisors or making the decision-making in the hands of the founders and the VCs that established the chain. We really engaged the community to begin to develop governance. And in that, there was a lot of challenges. But I would say that this, initial state of governance that we have now, V1, is what we're transitioning to. It's like looking at, live, raw earth, right? And now we've got to shape that earth and create more rigor, more processes, more procedures, as AVB was saying, to make that next version even better. So we know that this is going to be iterative. We know it's going to take time, and we know we won't get it right up front, right? We're just not going to get it right. So I think that's both the power of what we're doing, and it's kind of the side effect of saying that that it's both the negative and the positive that we're working through. But what is exciting is that we have an active Congress now, right? 29 elected members, elected by the community, right? And so we made the houses as big as they are because we wanted to make sure that we knew that there was a potential for collusion. We knew that, there could be coalitions that formed that tried to take over, the governing bodies. But, the good thing is that we have people like Cameron and other members in these houses because we made them in such a fashion that would be enabled. Now, the other thing that I would say is that, this process that we're going through, it will be bumpy, but, we're going to continue to make things a lot better. And so the idea, like AVB was saying, is how do we grow this voting body? What are the criteria to vote in this next election? What kind of election are we going to build? Those are all the things that we have to work through in very short order. So we've got about 5 months left to deliver a new voting mechanism, to stand up these processes and procedures, to then turn this governance over to whoever the next elected officials are, assuming some of these folks will run as well and still be in the houses for another term.
Yeah, and if I could just add to what Blaise mentioned, because there's a fourth category. Assuming that we have all the processes in place, I like the analogy of terraforming, because if we in this room had to terraform a planet, we wouldn't pick people off the street. You'd probably want to have some nuclear scientists. And so that fourth category speaks to the challenge of having people that are very skilled and experienced and smart. They may just not be skilled or experienced in the governance realm. And to be perfectly honest, the opportunity cost of them attempting to do governance is just greater than what they could be doing, say, in engineering. So there is a bit of the spinning of the wheels from having people that may just not be into governance. So that's why I think that the big picture is important. We have people that felt the need to step up to make sure that the first council gets done right. And I would be patient on this group of people's ability or willingness to put in the processes so that then they can go away. And at least from the Transparency Commission, what I've done quite explicitly, and everyone agrees, is we're putting in frameworks in place so that it doesn't matter who's in the Transparency Commission. As long as they're doing their job and applying the frameworks, the outcome should be the same. Like I could resign the day after all the frameworks are gone, are there, and the outcome should be the same. So I think that is something to aspire to. It's just like the fourth category after the first three. So it's a train in motion. Whether it's going to crash or get to its destination, it's up to us.
And in terms of what Cameron, you mentioned, the status of the House of Merit, I guess like regular kind of like organizational theory governance, you would maybe in democracy theory categorize this as sort of a majority dictatorship. So you could actually say it works because you have stuff that's being pushed, but you are questioning the representation. Is that how it's supposed to be? I just wonder, you, AVB, how do you see that situation?
I mean, if I had to be devil's advocate, and I think I am the only one that is more in contact with the other faction, an analogy would be when you go to like a legal case in court, and there's some great examples captured in English common law. Sometimes a judge slaps a lawyer because they're just wasting time. There's an accident, and the insurance company is suing, and the lawyer is asking, is the person alive? Of course it's alive, it's in the room with us. So there are things that you, for the sake of efficiency and pragmatism, you just don't waste time on, because you can just assume. So when you look into governance, the tricky area is, if we have a majority, and we're all busy doing 4 things in the ecosystem, do we have to spend an entire week, with mental masturbation, for lack of a better word, on something that we already agree on, and if we disagree, put it in writing, post it in a forum, it's going to pass anyway. I think that's a tension that we have. How much is due diligence? How much is due process? How much do we grant people the opportunity to express themselves? Do we have a body that is intellectually honest to consider different points of view and to blend in different points of view so that we have some compromise? How much is it super basic and we just sign it and move along? Like, we have to do years worth of work, if you look at like the real world, in 6 weeks to make sure that this stays alive. And that's the tension. Whether everyone is able to see how complex that is and where to be super fast and where to take the time to ask questions, I don't think so. It's more of an ego issue. Everyone is very successful in their own space by doing their own thing. So when you're suddenly all equal, it's...
If I just may, and I'll let you follow up. What another key thing I heard you talk about, AVB, and also a bit you, Blaise, is institutions, right? We have this body, and in states we also know that you can have institutions, but if there's no legitimacy around those institutions, then basically, or whatever policy output or policy outcome there might be, it might make, it might have zero value or negative value if there's no legitimacy. So I just wonder, and how do you see that, Cameron, in terms of what you describe of House of Merit? How to approach this from where we are now? What should we do now to make sure you from your point of view, representation is taken into account? There is legitimate organization.
So first thing is implement some basic processes. How quickly can a vote be passed, or how many people does it actually require to vote? Can people vote just to have even if quorum is met, can they vote just to have their voice heard? These are all things that aren't totally defined yet within the House of Merit, and so I'd say first things first is just get clear on how decisions are made internally. And this was one of my primary points before we pass a budget. Let's understand how we would actually go about spending that budget before asking for money. And so first thing is just implement some basic processes around capital allocation. Second thing is devising a strategy. Very basic stuff, by the way. This is not rocket science. It's not new. Corporate strategy and corporate governance has been around for decades, or hundreds of years. And so we can just implement a similar process, and grant programs have also been around, and we've learned a lot of lessons around grant programs, and people here, honestly, are just trying to reinvent the wheel. Well, this has been done before.
It was interesting. Everyone always references rocket science. Rocket science, it's hard for it to succeed, but it is easy to see when it is not working. The rocket exploded. And this is where I think that there needs to be empathy. Like if you're speaking with like, spectrum level engineers, it is easy to know that your technical code is not working because it doesn't work. Like you get together to troubleshoot and you have a shared language where it either you get the outcome or you don't. The sad truth in the social sciences is that everyone bends themselves backwards to interpret the same words differently. And that's why us lawyers become absolute millionaires watching two people try to ascertain what the meaning of X word is.
Community. Yeah, what is community?
And I think that's where, for something that the engineers know can easily be fixed if it doesn't work, for us who suffer watching extremely poor writing and then extremely poor interpretation of what was poorly written in the first place, and there's no clear way that things die in social experiments. States don't go bankrupt. Gus from Denmark may challenge the legitimacy of an institution, but the truth is, the worse institutions are run, the more likely they're to succeed. So we have that challenge of trying to understand that we're building a digital nation. Yep. Some people emphasize the digital, some people emphasize the nation. The digital camp is extremely confident because A, you know when it's failed, but B, they're the only ones that can build it. That we buy into the vision or we don't. The nation camp, oh man, that's a bunch of like childhood trauma and vision and utopia and dystopia. There's a point where you go around in circles, and at many points of the circle you have to ask, are we still talking about the NEAR ecosystem, or are we projecting something else here? Are we talking about incredible products for mass adoption and consumer applications, or UBI? Like, where are we at? Because they're at some point just not compatible. And if they are, the conversation is so broad, it loses meaning. So I think we need to pick our battles. Cameron and I have had conversations. Sometimes you compromise on one thing. Grassroots budget. Done. Let's focus on processes. Like, some things in the past may not be ideal, not much we can do about it. The key question is, in 6 months' time, do we have a new successful election, or do we wrap it up?
Yeah. And how do you see that, Blaise? Is it all about processes? That's I heard a lot of talked about, and like getting more into connecting better the culture, or are there specific products, technological things that also needs to be iterated on? As you're saying, it's a complex problem. As AVB is saying, we maybe like several complex problems at the same time, like we have several battlefronts. Are there legal obstacles? Like, what do you think like are some of the main things that you've already been part of the journey of NDC for a while, but like what are the next big like challenges you see to address this?
So yeah, I mean, our challenges, are the same challenges really that we've faced since the beginning of the ecosystem, and that is that, NDC is not our first experiment with deploying funding, right? We've had the grassroots movement going for a while. We've had NF deploying grants, right? We've had what we call guilds previously that were deploying funding. So really, I think our largest challenge is a challenge that every community or ecosystem face, and our largest challenge is collaboration and innovation, right? How do you bring a bunch of people together to make them, want to collaborate with one another to create that vision and move forward? So, yeah, on the technological front, we've got to build better elections, right? We need to look at the legal aspects of what does it mean to have these governing bodies? Do they need specific legal requirements or specific, legal setups, to further protect or indemnify the members of Congress? The other aspect is the processes and procedures, which we're talking a lot about now. How do we actually deploy funding? How do we measure the result to make sure that we're actually growing the ecosystem? We just don't have a lot of folks taking funding. That's what we saw a lot at last cycle, is that a lot of funding was deployed, but the actual measurable result was quite small. So we need to make sure that these experiments that we're doing have tangible results and are moving the needle forward. And that's probably the biggest challenge. So we just won't get there this first governance session, but the idea is to put enough rigor, and I won't say rules because we don't want a ton of rules. The moment we start introducing rules, then we got gatekeeping going on again. So how do we really collaborate and create enough rigor in the system just so that it propels through this next Congress session? We have a fair election, we elect members to Congress, and we've got a better operating model for governance than we do this current session. That's really where we're at.
If we think of governance as capital allocation, because at least for now, that's the community treasury and how to allocate capital, and then we draw an analogy with, say, a VC fund. VC funds are mostly fails and some wins. The wins make it worth it. In a young ecosystem, we should be thinking the same way. We really don't care if 90% of things we fund fail. We just want 10 things to take us to 10 million daily active users, and then 20, and then 50, and then we just keep learning and iterating. So the issue with the funding is not really the metrics, or not really what we're funding. The issue are the humans. The technology is great. The problem is, do we have, or does the community feel like we have the due diligence required so that if something fails, we feel okay because they tried their best, and we move on. We should encourage entrepreneurship. That's American spirit. Hi, Lisbon. We should not be a culture that punishes people for being wrong if it was an honest attempt. If you worked minimum wage nights and weekends and tried something new, we should applaud that. So then the question is, what can we do to ensure that the people that are in charge of disbursing money are always, A, required to have that high standard, considered a full picture, and B, are actually doing their jobs. The problem with DAOs is that the moment you grant autonomy, I have the autonomy to go to bed anytime that I want, but if I were flying a plane and there's 700 people waiting for my A380 to depart, I am no longer autonomous to go to bed at any time that I want and drink a bottle of scotch and whatever. So there needs to be a compromise of, it is a privilege and a big responsibility to represent the community in these bodies. And we should be demanding these bodies to operate at a high standard, and we should be unapologetic about this, and it's the only way we move forward.
So let's talk about the House of Merit.
Just to cut in, so we're about to already go to the second half of the session. I'll just let Cameron respond to this one, but before that, our dear Morning Fresh audience, please think about questions for the guys, because in a moment we would love to hear from you. Yeah, please go.
Yeah, so these people, in the House of Merit, a lot of these people are busy. They run other companies, or other, Bone Wang manages entire protocol team. So he doesn't always have the time to sort of deal with governance. And you need to motivate these people, inspire them to want to contribute. And if you're around a bunch of other people that, you don't necessarily align with, you're not really inspired to contribute. You're not really, at all incentivized. And right now in the House of Merit, I just think there's very little incentives for very busy people who have very important other things to do to deal with. Honestly, there's a lot of incompetence. A lot of people in the House of Merit don't actually have merit in the ecosystem. These people were just moderating Discord channels and stuff, and that's important, but they're not actually driving real ecosystem metrics at scale. And I'm very just not confident that these are the decision makers that we need in order to drive the ecosystem to be competitive, not with Solana, but actually with AWS. We want to open the internet. We're competing with Google and Amazon. These people in the House of Merit are not the current people that are going to actually compete with Google and Amazon. And so, we need to actually refine what merit means. And I guess this is now up for the Congress to decide. But I'm not optimistic that these people are going to figure it out, including myself, because I don't want to participate with them.
So maybe that was a great end note for provoking more questions from the audience. I don't know, we will see. But we will open up now for questions from the audience. So we think we're going to start over there with this gentleman. You have a mic coming just next to you there. There you go.
Hey. First of all, governance is very difficult, as you can probably tell from what's said and reading between the lines. I guess it's important to say who I am. My name's Herb Stevens. I'm one of the co-founders of the Democracy Earth Foundation. I've known Cameron since he was a student at UC Santa Barbara, leading the blockchain efforts there. I'm also one of the co-founders of proofofhumanity.org. I'm actually ID number 1. And I heard Cameron make a comment about, governance has been done for hundreds of years in a very, very productive way. And if you look at the way venture capitalists deploy their money, in every organization, you have a board, you have a management team, and then you have the shareholders, right? And the board is typically kept really small and tight, an odd number, 5 typically, not 20-something. I'm also an advisor to Aragon. I'm credited on their white paper. And early on, they decided, with all good intentions, let's hand governance out to the community. I pulled my hair, I yelled at them, I said, don't do it. And if you saw their announcement last week, they just gave back $175 million to all of their users, and they're starting over. I would advise, keep your boards really tight. They're incentivized to know what the community wants, and they can make decisions really fast. And if you throw out governance to the community, the problem is time. Yeah, we have to move fast. We actually have to have results. And whereas it may work itself out, it's going to take years if you throw governance out to a huge community. Keep it tight. Have a management team report to the board. And then there are certain times when, yes, you throw it out to the whole community for a vote. And that's where you elect that board, right? And so that's my piece of advice, and I'd wondered why you weren't heading in that direction, a proven direction where hundreds of millions of dollars are deployed to very effective governance.
Anyone want to take that, AVB first?
If that was a question.
Yeah. Yeah.
Disagree with what Blaze said. Let's just throw it out to the community, because that does not work.
You'll get Bodie McBoatface.
Yeah.
You guys know Bodie McBoatface? Like the European or the British government wanted the community to name a boat, and they named it Bodie McBoatface. And when you throw it out to the community, it's going to be run by a bunch of degenerates, especially when it's anybody who has a wallet and can scan their face.
I think
They're not real contributions to the ecosystem.
I think that people need to become better at scenario planning. As someone that has now outlasted 3 NEAR Foundation CEOs, we need to really think, okay, what happens next? And then what happens next? And what happens next? When you have very busy, very talented people, very accomplished people be elected into a house of merit, the community is signaling something. We want quality, we subscribe to their work. When they don't show up to do the work, are they at fault? Or is the house of whatever institution not enabling them to operate at the same level there as they have already proven that they can operate elsewhere? The game theory here is very simple. I know that my protocol that I run is not going to go away. DevOps was very smart. They slowly moved to the corner, and they are as solid and as successful as they've ever been. If you don't make room for me to contribute, I know that you'll be dead before I am. And this is where the ego and the humbleness and to understand where we're all coming from is. Because now have people come to me as a person in the intersection of most communities asking me, why are they not participating? Why are they not contributing? And I was like, well, maybe because you tried to fuck them for 6 weeks and now you're wondering why it's a silent vote. So this is a fundamentally human problem. The intention of the checks and balances is there. What we're doing, the Transparency Commission is there. If people can't talk to each other, there's nothing I can do about it. And to be honest, NDC, if it succeeds, it's going to be like AI-driven. And if it fails, it's going to be because another governance experiment in the history of governance. It's just hard.
Yeah, so I would just, to answer your question more directly, we do have somewhat of a board of directors. That's called the Council of Advisors. One of the things we didn't cover in this session was the governing bodies and what their actual roles are. So the Council of Advisors has the ability to, veto legislation, veto budgets based on, how the progress is going to make sure that we're heading in the right direction. So they are somewhat the board of directors in that scenario. We have the Transparency Commission. One of the things that we know for certain is that collusion, misappropriation of funds, misconduct. They seem to be very, keen things in Web3. And we know that's something for Web3 to truly begin to grow. And we've heard it throughout the conference. People said we need to remove bad actors. So we created the Transparency Commission to be the watchdogs of governance so that they can remove bad actors in the case that those things are found. The House of Merit is a bigger body, but it's really about representation of our entire ecosystem. So we have many verticals. We've got DeFi, we've got creatives, marketing, right? We have gaming, we have all these verticals. So the idea of the House of Merit was to get good representation of the ecosystem because they're responsible for budget planning to make sure that there was good collective representation. Now, this is an active experiment, and we are looking at how this is actively working. What's interesting is that we made sure that only OGs could be elected into this first Congress. So you had to be with the ecosystem at least a year and a half, right? And like Cameron said, we see several very successful individuals elected into this Congress. But they have very active projects they're responsible for, P&Ls they're responsible for. And so what we're trying to see here is where is the kind of the fine line between being very successful and running your own project and then contributing to governance versus maybe you have a smaller project and are more active, right? Someone like AVB, he's been around for a long time as an active community member, active really part of the community, and so he's going to be more active. So we're seeing this experiment live, and we're not going to really quite know 100% until we get through this next 6 months what it looks like. Now, there has been a question proposed, do we need to bring professionals into governance? Do we actually need to hire real governance professionals to come in and run part of this? And so that's something that I think we'll have a better understanding of to see how this current Congress executes.
So please, Cameron, a short answer, and we're gonna follow up to your professor, and we're gonna go back to the next question.
Hopefully, yeah.
Just pull up a chair.
The working at NEAR Foundation for a while, we've been trying to solve some of these hardest questions about identity systems and voting and all this other stuff. Like, how do you actually assess the growth and success of an ecosystem? Really hard questions to answer. And I feel like all of these hard questions were just taken and just shoved over to the NDC to figure out. And given about, hey, you have 6 months to figure out how to do verifiable human voting and make sure that there's this digital government that can be stood up. And it makes zero sense, because now we have a bunch of people that are supposed to be solving, honestly, these completely unsolved problems in all of society, to be done in 6 months by people who don't have experience doing it, or have any actual process that they're interested in implementing, because a big part of this is a lot of these people are actually from places that don't actually have functioning democracies. And so now you're trying to get a bunch of people who don't have great experience with democracy to not only interact and behave well in a democratic process, but then create one. It's kind of insane. And so I actually think that this is kind of set up to fail, because it's probably trying to answer all the unsolved problems in 6 months.
If you would think about it as an MVP, and you say, okay, it's MVP, so you need one thesis to test for this product, or this incrementation of an MVP, right? Then it's quite a lot of things you're trying to test at the same time. And then you have 6 months right now, iteration loop, basically, right, to then do that again. That's
identity, voting, attribution.
But I'm sure this is a topic we're gonna enter. I just want to park it for one moment, AVP, and then go for more questions to the audience. So please raise your hands again. We have one guy in the front row here, please.
So I have 2 questions. One is, how do you know, after 6 months, you are successful? The second question is, it looks like the way you guys are operating is more like a one-person company. So that means I have to do everything. So I have to build the product, I have to go for funding, I have to fix a bunch of other things. So you have a bunch of these problems like identity and this and that. Is it also responsibility of House of Merit to figure those things out, or figure out how we can help the ecosystem, or how we can bring more people? So, yeah, so the question is, why do you have a separate body who think about the process or improving the process? Because that's different from running. So it's driving a car is different from maintaining the car, right? So I'm probably not going to maintain the car if I want to drive properly, right?
Yep.
Yeah, let me answer that. So we'll start with what we did, right? So what we had originally was a governance working group, and that working group was really broken into 5 main work groups that focused on standing up governance. So we know that technology and the tech stack, like we've got to build technology to be able to vote, do all of these things. Governance is another category. We need folks focused on building and designing governance processes and procedures. We know that legal, in Web3 is a major aspect that needs to be addressed. Really, the other one is marketing. How do we market the NDC? Do we market it at all? Do we market the NEAR brand? How do we associate those things? And then the last one's community engagement. How do we keep the community engaged in governance and throughout the process? So the idea is that these work groups are supposed to carry into V1 governance. So we haven't actually reached that point yet. One of the things that was a little bit of a challenge when we transitioned from the GWG, which was a smaller group of people, only about 7 to 13 people doing everything, to now we scaled that up to 29 individuals, was that some of the factions or some of the the coalition didn't want to engage the existing governance working group. So all of that process and that translation and that migration was lost. So that's one of the reasons that we have kind of the situation we have now, where everything looks a little bit dysfunctional because there wasn't a true transition plan, right? Now we're seeing that everyone is actively engaged in Congress. Their mindset's beginning to change. They first started out with everything's terrible, and now they're starting to say, oh, well, maybe it's not that bad. It just needs improved, right? So, but absolutely 100%. We need to make sure that we have RFPs for the technology, or work groups focused on technology, work groups focused on governance and processes. We need to get legal in place, right? So all these things need to be created in more of a decentralized fashion from what they were before, and that's the real goal of this. Go ahead, please.
Oh, thank you. Ooh, that's the longest quiet I've been for a long time. There is definitely different points of view and a discrepancy on how much the NDC should do. I personally think that it was attempting to do too much before and didn't actually do that much. The problem is with regulatory capture. If we say there is one body that will do A, you exclude other people to also do it. And what I'm saying in the ecosystem now is high-ranking people going around giving multiple groups trust, resources, but no loyalty. Either you ship or we don't give a fuck about you. Like, this ecosystem has to grow. How did we have a legal working group funded for an entire year and 20 council members now are being told to go engage private legal counsel because we don't have answers to these questions? How did we have a governance working group for an entire year and we literally have a one-pager that says you have oversight? We've spent 4 weeks drafting over 100 pages of frameworks and processes, and then the creator of the one page telling me I don't have mandate or scope. These are the situations where you're like, look, either we do something or we don't. And if we have a choice, I'm a minimalist. Marketing DAO. Everything you've seen on stage today, where have you heard about it before? Why haven't we had any bounty? I wrote the Marketing DAO charter, and I can tell you, we're falling way short on those metrics. Why have we not had any other initiatives funded from the community treasury? V1 makes me bullish because we finally are opening the door for initiatives. Yep. In my perspective, House of Merit should be very minimalist. They simply approve a budget and they put in the frameworks and the criteria to give the money out. We should be saying, hey, the community treasury is a big pile of gold. It will be given to our best. Come with proposals. We shouldn't be catering for the lowest common denominator, keeping people that want 10 a month to do some bullshit online. No. We need to go out there and get our best. Doesn't matter. Is it 10,000 a month? Is it 50 million? You tell us what you can do, and we'll figure it out. The money is sitting there. We've got very capable people with the intellectual capacity to assess anything that comes at them, and we should be enabling other people. I am allergic to bureaucracy growing. I am allergic to people being further and further removed from the community. And the new management, which has its ways and may not be popular, came in to course correct this feeling that we were no longer a blockchain ecosystem. They came in to represent the engineers that have been dedicating 2 years of the time to deliver technology that is unparalleled and no one knows of. So I think that we are at the crossroads where we have to decide whether we're a builder's blockchain or a bureaucracy blockchain, whether we want to be passive and mediocre or be willing to say, hey, maybe we can agree to disagree, but we have to move on. And yeah, I think that Cameron has his work cut out for him.
Do you want to quickly comment, or we move to next?
We can move to the next.
Yeah. So let's go to the third question. And we have a guy that put the hand up very fast. We'll go for him.
Yeah, overall modern age governance is pretty tough. I mean, applying traditional governance values to techno-social projects or things hasn't proven to work well. And by techno-social, I mean anything that involves technology and anything of the social or the soft sciences, right? And we see this happening across the board, not just in NEAR. It's happened to Compound, where governance was driven by VCs in particular, most recently in Polkadot, where proposals were being hijacked and so forth, and even ApeCoin DAO, which I was involved in. But I think there's light to bringing subject matter experts or people who can be very critical on things that are happening and or advice on how to do things. But I think a core struggle really has been on how do we identify these subject matter experts that can come on board, and how do we keep them engaged and incentivized? And this is something I think in other ecosystems, ask themselves. And I'm curious to you guys, what's your take on this? How do you keep these folks or find them or keep them engaged in providing value to the ecosystem?
Yeah, I can really just speak for myself. Why I want NDC to work is because I want this mothership of an organization where I can spin up local communities. So I run the Banyan Collective is essentially NEAR US. We help seed, near San Francisco, New York, plan to seed Austin, Seattle, Denver, Chicago, DC, Florida, Miami, all these other city nodes. And I don't want to be this megacorp. I don't want all of these people reporting to me and us. I would much prefer to spin up a grassroots organization and have that point them to the NDC to get long-term support. And so I am directly incentivized to have NDC succeed, so I can actually push people to a proper bucket of funds, and those funds are actually followed up with proper due diligence, and we can grow the ecosystem this way. And so I want NDC to work because of that. So I guess my point is I'm participating because I'm directly incentivized for this future of my company. If let's say the protocol team doesn't really see a need for the NDC to exist, I'm assuming that those people are not going to be as active. I'm not saying that's the case, but we need to actually align the goals of the NDC with the goals of the individual. Because right now it's not going to be money. You can go get more money doing other things. It's not really just interest, because those people weren't researching and doing those things before. They were working on another project, and so I don't know. I would say, yeah, just make sure that the goals of the NDC align with the actual goals of the organization people.
If you remember my reference to DevOps, living in the conversation, they have a really interesting initiative around decentralized DevRel. So before it was within Pagoda. And I've attended conferences literally everywhere in the world, paid by myself. And I'm often the only one that is not an employee of Foundation, Proximity, or Pagoda. So just having a decentralized DevRel where anyone can put their hand up and say, hey, I've got the skills, I've got the interest, I live around the corner, and there's an avenue for them, makes a huge difference. So the question is, how can we extend that to more things? I see DevRel and evangelists or cheerleaders, people that can represent NEAR and get interest and leads and then direct them to the right person as being slightly different. How do we create a structure and programs where people feel like there's backing for them to go out and do that? I can tell you, for most of my time at NEAR, we've never had that. You go out there, you meet some people, you tell them NEAR is great, and they get excited. I don't know where to send them to. NDC was nuclear. I would certainly never send anyone that way. That's the easiest way to lose people until now. And the question is, as Cameron says, how can we remove most of the governance and bureaucracy so people spend the least amount of time doing the minimum needed so that they can then go away and create value in their own ways? We can't predict it, but we really need to get that.
Subject matter expert value. So like you're going to need, over the last like year and a half, we stood up all these builder groups. We have a wallet builder group. Go to nearbuilders.com to check out all the builder groups, NFT builder, DeFi builder, all these other things. And so if you go to one of these conferences, you meet a DeFi builder, send them to the DeFi builder group, send them to the wallet builder group. And then in my perfect world, each of these groups will have their own treasury to set the direction of that key vertical. But right now in the House of Merit, they don't want to touch anything that I have been remotely a part of. And so this is the challenge here. Because I'm not even a part of this. I get zero money from this. The whole point of me standing up these builder groups and Shot on my team is to actually step back and have new leaders take control of that vertical. But this is the dilemma we're in now, is that everything I've touched is radioactive.
And maybe you want to follow up. It sounds like you have a follow-up to that. Go ahead, but
I was talking to Cameron a little bit about this, and I think in particular, just me myself being in the space for over 10 years, I think at this point, like for folks who are SMEs, right, or what he just mentioned that are, the contributors that want to essentially share the project, I think there's like an information problem because a lot of folks in the ecosystem, sometimes they do these things for hedonistic purposes. They don't care about getting paid, they care about contributing. I think most of the time we see that folks leave an ecosystem or kind of step back because no value is highlighted or the information that is being disseminated is not shared with the world. So you might have someone propose or get feedback to a white paper, write a white paper, make a contribution, but they're not getting the right amount of information or value out of it. And I think one parallel that I recently saw was in the academic area, in the academia, right? Like as a PhD or people who are doing research, you have your quote-unquote duty to do peer review. This is a not paid work. You might be reviewing like an 8-page paper, which might take you like 5 hours or something, right? And you go ahead and write down and say, hey, this is how I think you should improve it. I saw this happening somewhere else, or this is garbage. So for the past few years, a lot of folks are doing a great job, but most recently, a lot of professors and people in academia have been writing really bad reviews for students and academic papers. And just at this point, we're seeing that a lot of these folks are taking these reviews that were given to them and that are horrible, putting them on socials and saying, this person did a bad job of reviewing my paper, But again, this is unpaid, and most people really just want to do it for the hedonistic value. And I think it's an information problem because in ecosystems, sometimes you have people that come and provide value without getting paid, but they're not getting highlighted, or essentially the information is not disseminated quite well. Just some thoughts.
Yeah, so just to come back to your question, then we can go to the next one. So how do you keep, and how do you find these advisors, these experts, how do you keep them engaged? First, it starts with contribution, and you just literally said that, right? You've got to find people that are willing to contribute to the process. That means that whatever's being worked on aligns with their passions and their own personal goals, right? So just hiring experts and bringing them in isn't necessarily going to move things forward if they're not passionate about what we're actively trying to achieve, and then they're not engaged in actually contributing. So I think that's a key aspect. You can bring in hundreds of people and maybe only find 3 contributors, right? But then the second point you said, and that's something we've got to get better at, is how do you kind of put the spotlight on people and thank them for their contribution, right? So we created something called Kudos, which is about appreciation, acclamations, right? We need to do better about like celebrating the contributions of folks, paid or unpaid, but certainly even for the unpaid folks, to make sure that they are getting notability within the ecosystem and they're building reputation. So reputation is a big item that we need to continue to work on and build that shows your value of contribution to the ecosystem overall. But yeah, that was just a follow-up there.
As you guys all know, the end is near, so we just have time for one more question. And I see you have been very proactive, so please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for everyone for discussions. I want to make a call for action and also want to see how, what do you think about it? So I have a lot of reflections, and I see that many people talk about the problems, which is kind of a good, but okay, I mean, everyone can see different problems from different perspectives. What we need to create is a place for project managers. Like, I really see it missing. People don't talk about it enough. If you go to like a successful business, if you go to a successful creators, they will see, we need a project manager. It doesn't matter if it's a technical, artist, or community. Project managers. I don't see project managers. I don't see enough people talking about it. That's my latest reflection. Yes. What do you think about call for action?
I love it. Just want a racy chart. What are the things that we have to do? Who's actually going to do them? When are they going to get them by? What is going to happen if they don't do it? What is going to happen if they do it? This is not that difficult. But
it's not that difficult, but we need to make that space, found it, create it.
You hit the nail on the head. It's not
don't post it, nobody will post it.
It's not that difficult. It's just that somebody literally has to show up. Like the bar is that low. And to the point that I started with, humans using language.
Well, you can wait or be proactive. Be proactive.
You want me to answer the question, or? The challenge that we have with communities, are we still in bull market mode where we do some bullshit airdrop and we pretend like there's users because they just want to get $20? Are we on corporate mode where we have millions of users that no one knows who they are and whatever, they have transactions for now? Or do we really want to go to that core? I mean, I define community in Web3 as the people that are willing to take credit for somebody else's really hard work and they go out there and sell it. I spoke to Skidanov yesterday. He doesn't know how to speak to humans, but if I get excited about his work, I am out there whoring myself to sell it. That's community. Where are the diehards that understand the engineering, and while the engineers take some rest, they will go out there and sell it? Now, all of us are gifted programmers. Some of us are psychopaths that can talk to people. We've got a community. We can succeed together. We have never really tried to identify and empower that cohort. The people that do it, they have it in their core. And the day that I live near, I'll be either dead or near will be dead. But most other people that were there at some point, they just left. They realized, yeah, I am doing free labor for somebody that's really smart and I want to help them grow, but I can't carry the entire ecosystem on my shoulders. So now the message is of hope. We've got the NDC to channel as many initiatives as possible. It needs the bureaucrats to get out of the way and let people do their best. Once again, like the call to action to me is, you got an idea, create the project manager's DAO, and really get together with the best people you can think of and put in place everything you need. I'm in calls with the House of Merit right now, well, the other half of the House of Merit. They are looking for grassroots DAO to fund because obviously the current ones, there's just not that much happening there. I work closely with the Dev Hub, and they've been given mandate to do what other parts of the ecosystem are not doing. I'm in contact with New Horizon, and they've been given more and more expectations and responsibility. Like, no one should be sitting in their ass complaining, I agree with you. The days of anons on the governance forum hopefully are behind us. And the message for people should be, let's try to find a way to come up with a solution, remove the people that are in between you and that solution, and give it a go. Blaze it's something that, depending on the context that you apply it to, I disagree, but as a general statement is true. When you start doing the work, you realize how hard it is. We need people to just get their hands dirty, and yeah, that's a good place to wrap it up.
Do you want to follow up, Ken, on this one?
Yeah, part of the big issue is like none of us actually trust each other, and that's going to be a really hard place to start if we're trying to build a digital international government that is responsible for redefining a voting system, identity system, attribution system, and like honestly these unsolved problems that no ecosystem has solved before. And I would say it probably starts by just hopping on a call and understanding why we're all here. I was very transparent on why I'm here. I want an entity that I can spin up organizations to and send to. Why NEAR? You know, a lot of these people who I've talked to, they barely can answer these questions, or don't even do due diligence on some of the grassroots DAOs that we're speaking to. And so there's another big question that I want to flag, or not question, but point, is the whole Transparency Commission at some point was funded by Marketing DAO in the last probably 2 months or so. There's a you can go to the forum and actually see all this. Why, if somebody in the Transparency Commission primarily gets paid through Marketing DAO, bring up any issues with Marketing DAO? There's a absolute conflict of interest here. And,
I mean, as a number one spokesperson against the Marketing DAO, see, it's ironic that people complain that I would be biased against the marketing DAO because I have been so outspoken, and that I would keep them in place because they pay me. This is where you need to have processes and integrity.
Exactly.
Doesn't matter who makes an assessment, if you apply, and I can show the framework, 9-step process, and then you establish every single element. This is what lawyers do, this is what legal process, due diligence looks like. Anyone that applies that list should come to the same outcome. Collusion. If a proposal would have not been approved but for the hopeless people in place, corrupt. If a proposal would have been approved by anyone, you put it in front of them, and you can actually do a sampling size. Get 4 random people from foundation, from random people from any country that you want, 4 strangers from the street. There are processes where these claims can be established. We've got a very comprehensive conflict of interest, proactive conflict of interest, where people will have to disclose, and then we manage the conflict. They can put measures in place, information segregation, you can abstain for certain things, you may have to step down. Like, most issues that can be identified can be dealt with, and this is where the importance of having a clear beginning and a clear end, and your process in the middle are, because the toxicity of half-baked ideas and ill-informed claims, it's killing the ecosystem.
And with that in mind, and the time in mind, we're just gonna say that's it for today. We are all still here. We can still have a conversation around it in the corridors.
We've got some boxing gloves.
Thanks a lot.
Please welcome back NEAR Foundation's David Morrison.
All right. Okay. We've wrapped it up, guys. It's done. It's finished. The Layer 2 stage is officially closed. We're going to take a quick break. Feel free to scan the QR code if you want to get your last-minute NCon. You can zoom in on your cameras. But I would encourage you to run downstairs as fast as you can, because there's a very special announcement with Ilya Polasukin taking place right now on the Layer 1 stage. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next year. God bless.